Representative Scott Drury. Scott Drury. From Southern Illinois, the Superintendent of Schools, Bob Daber. Mr. Chris Kennedy. The man I get to serve with in the Senate, his name is Daniel Biss. Daniel Biss. And the alderman from the 47th Ward, Amaya Pawar. Mr. Pritzker had just called and said he's running just a little bit late, but he will be here. Without further ado, I want to introduce my battle buddy, my teammates. This guy is the non-commissioned officer in the Army. He sets the rules and establishes the standards, and he will do so tonight, Representative Al Riley.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Hastings is trying to remind me of December 4th. When was it? 1972, when I got that big letter in the mail. It's good to see everyone here. And there are people here from all over the state. All over the state. I have colleagues here, and if you look at the crowd, all that I can tell the people that I've spoken to ever since I've been a member of the House, since 2007, is I told you, this is the Southland. Give yourself a round of applause. Some of them know, some of them may not know, but if you're going to be governor, you have to understand it's pronounced Matteson.
Opening statement. And my list is candidate Biss is first.
Good afternoon. It is an honor to be here. Thank you to the Rich Township Democratic Party. Thank you to the extraordinary committeeman, Tim Bradford, a great friend, a great mentor. He's going to be an amazing candidate for governor. We're going to do everything we can to help him. Let's just talk for a second about what this turnout means. What this turnout means about what's happening in the state of Illinois, how people are ready around the state of Illinois to rise up and take our state back. And we are not prepared to tolerate 4 more years of the pain caused by failed Governor Bruce Rauner. We are all here together, committed to that united goal to transform our state. Now listen, I'm Daniel Biss. I'm state senator in the 9th district. I didn't expect to find myself doing this. I used to be a math professor. I don't know what happened. I got lost in the way to the classroom, found myself in the legislature, and now find myself 2 years into a budget crisis, running for governor to transform the state of Illinois. I am especially honored, though, to be here having this conversation in the Southland. Because let's be honest for a second. Let's be honest. As much of a nightmare as Bruce Rauner has been, harming schools, harming healthcare, harming human services, causing $11 million of new debt every day, things weren't perfect before that either in Illinois. Look at the way the Southland has been treated. Look at the way schools in the Southland have been treated. Look at what the school funding system has meant for property taxes in the Southland. We've had a system in the state of Illinois where a few connected people, special interests, millionaires and billionaires, wrote our tax code for themselves and left the rest of us behind, wrote our school funding system for themselves, left the rest of us behind, and wrote our system of state government so that our voices weren't heard. In my opinion, this is the moment in 2017 and 18 to build a movement across the state to take our state back and transform our system, to have fairness and equity in our tax code and our school funding system. And with a turnout like this, I know the Southland's going to be the place we're going to start. Thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion.
And let me mention that I'm being assisted here by Representative Riley. Thank you, sir. All right, appreciate that. Our next is candidate Kennedy.
I moved here 30 years ago and I've fallen in love with the state. I never want to leave and I don't want my kids to go. I want them to be here to raise their own children so I can be around my grandchildren. I think that's the same thing that everyone in our state wants. We're going to have a hard time getting it because the state's headed in the wrong direction. think many of you know I moved here 30 years ago to join the anti-hunger movement. Volunteered in the Greater Chicago Food Depository, which I led when we doubled it in size. And today my wife and I run Top Box Foods, which is it's an anti-hunger program, not for profit, but our customers are our clients. And we get to know them and we talk to them. We hear their stories. Their stories reveal reveal an entire nation split, a whole group of people left behind, an economy that does not work for them. We're mostly in northern Illinois, but that same story is playing out throughout our state. People feel like the promise of this country has been broken, that the land of opportunity where anybody could make it is no longer true. The root of all evil is this fact, that the United States today, in America, if you're born poor, you'll probably stay poor. If you're born rich, you'll probably stay rich. If you're born in between, you'll have a life of terrible threats and hazards. Unless you're African American, where you have a much higher chance of dying poor than dying rich. That is not the promise of our country. The only reason we do that, the only reason we allow that to occur, is because we refuse to pay for our schools in Illinois. We do that because we use the property tax system to pay for those schools. The reason we don't abandon that is because the insiders make money off it. We need to get rid of that, and we'll restore the American dream for all Americans. Thank you.
And our next speaker is candidate Daber.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And when Representative Riley said there's people from all over the state here, I think it's because I was here. I'm from southwestern Illinois. I live in Matteson County. I'm a fourth generation resident there. My ancestors settled in Matteson County before there was a bridge across the Mississippi River. I'm a fourth generation Democrat. Grew up in a Democratic household, not rich, not poor. We were working class people. My mother was a teamster. I grew up with those values of organized labor, which I work as a candidate to preserve. For 38 years, I've been in public education. I'm a product of public education from elementary school through a doctor's degree. I've attended community colleges, state universities in Illinois. Also, I want to share that my children have attended all their education in a public school. There's two ways to support education, public education. Send your kids there and work to support those schools. That's what I have to say. Secondly, I've spent 22 years in local government. I've been a trustee, been a township supervisor, been a county board member, and was elected to become regional superintendent in 2008 after an administrative appointment. My work in public education has been this. I have worked to help young people prepare to get a job, because when they leave school, they need a skill set to be employable. I was a career and technical teacher for 28 years. I'm proud when I meet young people on the street and they tell me about their success. In closing, I just want to tell you that I am married to my wife. She has campaigned with me 26 years. We've been married 25. That says something about us. I have two sons, both attend public universities, and I support them by writing a check. No scholarships. So thank you for having me.
Great. Our next candidate for governor is candidate Pawar.
Good afternoon. My name is Pawar, and I'm the alderman of the 47th Ward in the city of Chicago. And I'm running for governor because I believe in social justice, I believe in equity, and I believe in fairness. I believe you believe in those same things. But if you elect people who hate government, if you elect people who hate public institutions, then your government will never reflect the values that I know all of us share. Now, I got into politics and public service after Hurricane Katrina, primarily because I watched policymakers and elected officials blame poor people for poverty. See, the constant narrative in our country over the last 40 years is that the wealthy tell us that the best way to help working people is to take away their rights. The best way to help working people is to cut their wages and benefits. And I can't think of a single time in history hurting working people helped them. Now we've got a logjam in Springfield that is immoral. We also have a governor who uses code words to divide our state. He talks about Chicago Public Schools and Cook County as the enemy. He says Chicago Public School teachers are virtually illiterate. That Cook County isn't a place that should be invested in. That people around the state don't get their fair share because people in and around Chicago get too much. See, that's just code for all kinds of other things that tell us that we are all different from one another. It's code for splitting up black, white, and brown communities against one another and turning us into the other and making us fight for our strength. So the only way to combat a negative and horrible and a racist agenda is to unite as white, black, and brown communities and address issues and the common inequities that impact every community. Thank you.
And they're all staying within time limit too, isn't that great? Very good. Our next speaker is candidate Pritzker.
Thank you, Governor. The Governor of the airwaves and our committeemen, thank you very much. And of course, our State Representative Riley and State Senator Hastings. I want to begin simply by acknowledging how lucky I am to have been married for 24 years to my wife, who's here. Would you mind standing up? In her honor and in honor of our 8th grader who just graduated 8th grade, I'm wearing my pink tie today. So maybe give her a round of applause too. Look, I grew up in a home where I had 2 parents who were social and economic justice advocates, and they were progressive Democratic activists. So I've been knocking on doors since I was 11 years old, and don't tell Chris Kennedy, but it was for Teddy Kennedy. And I built a business. My parents built a successful business. I went and built my own, and we've created more than 5,000 jobs in that business. But the defining work of my life has been the work on behalf of the people of Illinois, working to truly serve tens of thousands of people across this state. 55,000 kids in low-income school districts all across the state, some here in the Southland, get school breakfast every single day because of the work that I did. More than 50,000 kids learn to fight bigotry and hatred and intolerance because I helped to build a museum that teaches those kids how to stand up against hate. And for 20 years, I've been an advocate on behalf of early childhood education and quality child care, and thousands of kids in this state get that across the state. Now, I endowed the Center on Wrongful Convictions. Anybody know what that is? When people get convicted wrongfully and are put in prison for 10 or 20 years, and no one stands up for them, that's who stands up for them, the Center on Wrongful Convictions. But, ladies and gentlemen, we should talk about, we're all Democrats in this room, so huddle up. We need to talk about how we're going to win here. We have got to beat Bruce Rauner. And not only that, but 2 years later, we're going to go on and beat Donald Trump, too. Before we get there, we need to pass a budget. We need to fully fund our K-12 education system. We need to defend our labor unions and raise wages in this state. Thank you, Pritzker.
Right on. All right. Our next candidate is candidate Drury, please.
Good afternoon. How's the Southland doing today? As I'm speaking, I want you to think about one thing. I'm going to ask you one question. Is Illinois government on your side? No. That's what we're going to talk about today. Our government has been hijacked It's been hijacked by a billionaire governor on the right, and it's been hijacked by a very powerful Speaker of the House on the left. Who put their self-interests ahead of your interests. I'm here to tell you that my name is Scott Drury, and I'm running for governor to return our state to you. We have to take back Illinois. We have to make sure that this state stands up for the values that we believe in. We have to redefine the perception of our state so that when people hear the word Illinois, the first thing they think isn't corruption. That when they hear the word Illinois, the first thing they think isn't gun violence. When they hear the word Illinois, the first thing that they think isn't partisan bickering. We have to redefine the perception of Illinois so that the first thing that people think is a state that's on a rise, a state that cares about its people, a state that cares about education equity. These are the things that I've been working for. These are the things that I've been fighting for my 4.5 years in state government as a state representative. But it didn't start there. It started before that. Before I got into state government, I was a federal prosecutor. I was working at the U.S. Attorney's Office under Pat Pritzker. And I saw the worst in Illinois government. I interviewed people close up who were involved in Illinois government and municipal government, who were giving Illinois that bad reputation. And I said, you know what, enough is enough. I'm not just gonna fight this from the prosecutor's office. I'm gonna run for office, I'm gonna do something. And now I'm running for governor because the time has come to take the state back, to return the state to you. Our state has been hijacked. Enough is enough. We need to win in 2018, it's my goal. We need to have a Democratic governor, but to do that, we have to pick the right candidate. My name is Scott Drury, and I'm gonna be your next governor. Thank you so much.
This is a question. South suburban legislators have passed bills and supported projects such as the South Suburban Airport, the Metro Southeast Service Line, and the CTA Red Line extension to 130th Street. As we fight for regional equity, do you support projects such as these as the governor? What would you do to bring them to fruition? We start off with candidate Kennedy. Yeah, you can, sure, right.
I'll go up there. You know, I fundamentally believe that a government can invest in the economy that it is part of. I don't believe that an economy lives on that, a government lives on the economy like a parasite on a host, slowly killing it over time. I think the reverse is true. A government can invest in the economy and make it grow. Our city, our region, our state has always dominated the country's transportation, logistics, warehousing industries. And if we don't invest in those areas, we will fall behind and push those out of our state into places like Indiana and Wisconsin. I would invest heavily in anything that gave us a competitive advantage, in the three areas that you've identified would be super attractive. I think we need to make sure, though, that when we're investing in our communities, that we avoid the mistakes that I think were famously attributed, probably wrongly, to General Westmoreland when he said, you know, sometimes you have to kill a community, you have to kill a village in order to save it. And I think as we talk about transportation, as we talk about airports, as we talk about major roadway infrastructure, we need to be sensitive to the communities that we're trying to save and not destroy them environmentally or economically as we invest. The government should pass a capital bill. The only way President Trump saves himself is to pass $1 trillion infrastructure bill. That's what he's going to do. It's going to come at the end of the summer. And we need to match those dollars here, or that money will flow into other states. And we're doing nothing to prepare ourselves for that. A number of the mayors have been going to Washington to try to prepare, but nothing at the state level. And I would lead that effort.
Thank you. Same question as we go. This time is candidate Diver.
Sure. I've been a strong proponent of capital bills. I've made it public that in my first term, in my first year as governor, I would work on trying to pass a capital bill because we haven't had one since 1997. And the expansion of the red lines definitely favorable because it would help as a commuter for individuals from the Southland to be able to commute into the city for jobs, okay? So for that reason, I definitely would support that. And I've also worked on initiatives recently on a connector, an infrastructure connector of Amtrak, of high-speed rail from Alton to Chicago. And we need to further expand high-speed rail in the state of Illinois to other states. So I've been a strong proponent my entire governmental career of building infrastructure.
Thank you. And next is candidate Pawar.
Part of that question, you mentioned regional equity. It means recognizing what equity actually means. See, equity does not mean equal. Equity means spending money where it's needed the most. Equity means spending money and putting a capital bill in place that invests in communities that have seen disinvestment. See, the thing about communities that struggle economically is that far too often people who get elected say poor equals weak, or people aren't lifting themselves up by their bootstraps. The thing is, we need to pass a capital bill in the state, but what we really need to do is create a new deal between your state government and you, like we did after the Depression. We need to double down on public institutions, rebuild our infrastructure, our roads and bridges, schools and libraries, invest in community arts and the theater. And that also means expanding mass transit, building airports. And most importantly, as part of that, is making sure that the community that we build the infrastructure in is helping to build that infrastructure. Is making sure we're creating jobs in the communities that need them the most. Here's the thing. If you want good government, if you want investment in your community, the answer is not less government. The answer is good government. The answer to bad government is to elect people who believe in investing in all communities, not pitting us against one another and fighting over scraps. So rounding out that answer, absolutely on all of it, we are not a poor state. This is a state that's home to a $700 billion economy. We can make all the investments we need to make. We just need to make the wealthy pay their fair share.
Our next speaker, candidate Pritzker.
That's on the note of the wealthy should pay their fair share. I'm for a progressive income tax too. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm your governor. Southland will not be Forgotonia. I think we should continue the march toward a third airport. I think we need to focus on economic development projects here. But one really important thing we need to focus on is job creation. We need to help people start small businesses and build small businesses right here in the communities of the Southland. The availability of capital. When was the last time you went to a bank and were able to borrow money on a good idea? This state needs to provide the opportunity. This state, you need an advocate. Not your city isn't, your county isn't. The state needs to be the advocate on behalf of small businesses and startup businesses, because 2/3 of the jobs that get created in this state are created by small businesses and startup businesses. And when you create them in the community, the equity stays in the community, the profits stay in the community, and when you grow that business, where does it grow? Right in the community. So I'm going to stand up for job creation right here in the Southland. Now, do we need a capital bill? Of course we need a capital bill, but we've got to pass a budget so we can fix this state's credit rating, so we can go get that capital bill, so we can match the federal infrastructure bill that we think is coming. So ladies and gentlemen, are you with me? Let's go get our budget passed, and let's fix the credit rating of the state, and then let's invest in infrastructure right here in the Southland.
Our next candidate is candidate Drury.
In order to address the question of do we need more investment and how are we going to get there, we have to go back to the fundamental issue of trust in government. And we have to build a foundation of trust between you and the government, which just simply doesn't exist. It's been crumbling over the last 40 years. So as governor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to involve the community in the discussion. Why do we need the third airport? Because I'll tell you what happens in Springfield is that your representatives, and they're very effective, all the ones right here that got announced, they're very effective, but there's people who don't believe that the Southland needs anything else. They don't believe because the conversations aren't happening, because our government somewhat isn't a democracy anymore. You have two people making all the decisions. Even though my title is representative, sometimes you feel I'm not really represented, and I think a lot of my colleagues feel the same way. So in returning government to you, we're going to have those conversations. We're going to have you at the table telling us why you need an airport in the Southland, why we need the CTA Red Line expanded here, because it's jobs, it's opportunity, and you should have the jobs and the same opportunities that everybody has across the state. Now, one reason that there's a lack of trust in the state is because it's really easy to get up here and say, I'm going to give you this and I'm going to give you that, and that's what people have been saying for 40 years, but you have to look at people's histories. And what have they done to break from the status quo, right? Because we're all progressive here, we believe in progressive values, but I have this to say. How can you be progressive in the state of Illinois if you stick to the status quo of the last 40 years? Right? The word in progressive is progress. To make progress, we have to have a break from our past. It doesn't mean you're not a Democrat, it doesn't mean you don't stand for the same values, but you have to have a break from the past. And that's what I represent. We're going to return government to you. It's your government. You pay the taxes. You vote. You do everything, and we're going to get government back to you. We're going to fix government, and the Southland is going to be yours again. It's not going to be the Southland of the politicians who promise you stuff but don't deliver. That doesn't do anything but breed bad feelings. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last candidate on this question is candidate Biss.
The answer to the question is yes. I sit on the Senate floor 2 seats down from Mike Hastings. I sit right in front of Toy Hutchinson. They tell me what's up, and I've been honored to work with them on these issues to bring the kind of investment needed in the Southland. So of course, the answer is yes, I support those projects. But let's just say a couple things about that. Number one, it's not a coincidence that this investment hasn't happened yet. It's not magic, it's not because a coin flip came up wrong. It's because decisions are made by people who don't have the interests of this part of the state in mind, because we have a political system that's controlled by way too few people. And so what we need to do is demand that kind of investment by being involved in the political process and making our voices so that we can't be ignored. There's a lot of the state of Illinois that is either ignored by the Democratic Party or taken for granted by the Democratic Party. And we can't have that anymore. We have to stand up and fight together to make sure that the entire state receives the investment that it needs and that it deserves. I want to say one more thing about this. These projects are crucial because of the economic development they're going to create, but they're also crucial because of the jobs they themselves will create, because of the people who will be put to work directly on those projects. And way too often in the state of Illinois, the people who have been put to work on state construction projects aren't from the communities that are most in need of jobs. When I'm governor, that's not going to happen. When I'm governor, I'm only going to sign a capital bill if it makes sure, with accountability and real teeth, that the people who are put to work on those projects are people in the communities most in need of job creation, because that's what real fairness means.
Thank you so much. And as we move along to our next question, as follows. Recently, the Trump administration filed a rule changing the religious exemption to include moral objection as an opt-out provision for coverage of birth control through insurance provided by the employer. This would have the effect of allowing virtually any employer to deny birth control coverage to their employees for reasons that go beyond religious belief. Please explain your position on reproductive rights from birth control to abortion in Illinois in the event that the federal government continues to erode women's health care protections of the Affordable Care Act or of the Supreme Court strikes down Roe v. Wade. And this time we start off with the candidate Dybro, please.
Well, first of all, I support totally reproductive rights of women, 100%. Okay, and you know, for people who are against abortion, they need to be the ones who are most supportive of contraceptives. Okay? Let's make no mistake on that issue. Okay, the more readily available it is, the better control we have, and that's where I stand on that issue. Would I have signed Senate Bill or House Bill 40? Yes. Okay. Yes, I would say. Because I want to tell you why. I remember when Roe versus Wade passed. Now I remember why it passed. Is because there were women who were dying in alleys and in bad places when they were seeking abortion services, when they were not medically provided, and we do not want to return our culture to that state.
Next, candidate Pawar, please.
So here's another, or a simple truth. Women's rights are human rights. And you can't separate the two. And I feel like every forum we go to, every town hall I have, or every stage I share with the other candidates, one thing we keep having to say over and over again is, I am sorry that we have to keep talking about protecting our neighbors, our friends and family from our federal government. It's really unbelievable that there are conversations and dialogue about defunding Planned Parenthood. You know, if you go to lots of rural communities, not just in Illinois, but all over the country, that is often the only place where someone can find primary medical care. It isn't just a women's issue, it is a family issue, a children's issue. So as an elected official, I'm sorry that we have our highest elected official in our state, in our country, who won't commit to this very basic human right. It's an economic justice issue. It's a social justice issue. It's a human rights issue. And for God's sakes, this debate was over 40 years ago. Let's move on.
Our next candidate is candidate Pritzker.
I keep thinking about how, people have said that they marched in Washington this last January. How many people here marched here in Chicago or somewhere after the Women's March? But it wasn't just that march. It's been, for me, a journey of a lifetime on behalf of women's health and on behalf of a woman's right to choose. Because I started with my mother those many years ago, marching on behalf of choice. And 25 years ago in Washington, starting my own marching on behalf of choice, and every single year since. And on HB 40, the sponsors of the bill, both in the House and in the Senate, are supporters of my campaign because they know that every single year, from 25 years ago, 24, 23, 22, I have been standing with them and I continue to stand with them, and I will sign HB 40. Now, this governor either, when he was running, he said he was pro-choice. So either, and now he says he's going to veto HB 40. So either he was lying back then, or his right-wing buddies strangled him into agreeing with him now like he does on everything else. So ladies and gentlemen, which is it? Was he lying then? or is he a right winger now? Both.
Our next speaker, candidate Drury.
I'm proud to say that I am 100% pro-choice. I'm proud to say that in every election I've run in, I've been endorsed by Planned Parenthood. I stand with Planned Parenthood. I fight with Planned Parenthood. I'm proud to say that I'm a co-sponsor of HB 40. Just so we know, HB 40 is the bill in the House and the bill in the Senate that we sent to the governor that deals with the trigger law, that if Roe v. Wade somehow is overturned by the Supreme Court, in Illinois, women will still have the right to the health care that they want. The decision will be made between a woman and her doctor. Because I don't think Bruce Rauner deserves to be in that room between the woman and her doctor, right? And so, for that matter, Donald Trump doesn't deserve to be anywhere near that room at all either. They're not going to be in the room where it happens. So, when HB 40 was voted on, HB 40 also, besides dealing with the trigger law, HB 40 also deals with state funding of women's health care and women's reproductive rights. And I'm an absolute firm believer that the state should be funding that. Why should an issue of women's access to health care be an issue of how much money you have or who your insurance company is or who you work for? If you work for the state, you shouldn't get the health care that you need. If your daughters work for the state, they shouldn't get the health care that you need. That if you don't have the means, you shouldn't get the health care and you should be forced to make horrible options. We talked about 40 years ago, people going into the alleys. Well, what if your insurance company doesn't pay for it or the state says they're not going to pay for it? That is absolutely wrong. And that is why I stand behind HB 40, and I'm proud to say I was a co-sponsor of that bill, and I'm proud to say that I stood up and I spoke in favor of that bill when my Republican colleagues were coming up with the most ridiculous arguments about why a woman shouldn't have a right to choose in this day and age. It's embarrassing, and we need to stand up and we need to fight against it. So again, I just want to know I'm 100% pro-choice, and for everybody who's been doing these marches, continue, because the fight continues, and we need to make sure that we get that, not only that bill signed, but every bill after that signed.
Okay. Some good answers here. Now next is candidate Miss.
Thank you. The answer to the question is yes, I am pro-choice. I am repulsed by what the Trump administration is doing to attack women, certainly regarding access to contraception, but also look at who he's appointing to the Supreme Court. Look at it. I am honored to have the endorsement of our friend here from the Southland, Donna Miller, the new president of Planned Parenthood, Illinois. I'm honored to stand with Planned Parenthood and to fight with Planned Parenthood. It has been a crucial part of my work in the legislature, and I certainly was also a co-sponsor of House Bill 40. And let me tell you, we're not done yet. I don't know which time Bruce Rauner was lying. I don't know which time Bruce Rauner was lying. And it's our job to make sure he was lying the second time and not the first time. So write Bruce Rauner, call Bruce Rauner, picket at his office, make sure we push him to do the right thing and side with Illinois women against Donald Trump and Neely and their Supreme Court. And here's the other thing. We need to fight as a part of a joyful resistance movement, protecting vulnerable people across the state of Illinois from the Trump administration in every way we can. That's why I was the sponsor of a bill that we passed, that's on Bruce Rauner's desk right now, that says, I don't care what they do on the Affordable Care Act, we're not going to deny people health care in Illinois just because of a pre-existing condition. I put a bill on Governor Rauner's desk to fight the obscene pay equity gap so that women aren't going to make 79 cents on the dollar anymore. Governor Rauner signed that bill. We have opportunities across the state of Illinois to be standing up for people who Donald Trump is attacking because he is a bully. But with a bully in the governor's mansion, we're not doing all we can. It's time to defeat Bruce Rauner and lead the national resistance movement here in Illinois.
Thank you. And the last response to this question, which we've given some great response, the last is candidate Kennedy.
very much pro-choice and would be prepared to sign House Bill 40. The question was, what is Donald Trump trying to do to us? I think we began our meeting today, our interchange, by pledging allegiance. At the end, we say, with liberty and justice for all. We say, with liberty and justice for all. We don't say, with liberty and justice for the rich. And Donald Trump, when he agrees to allow people to deny coverage, he's saying, for liberty and justice for the rich, and everybody else is on their own. And that's not the America I want to be part of. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Great questions. This is a good one here. Well, they're all good. Gun violence is plaguing the city of Chicago and has touched certain communities in the Southland. As governor, what ideas do you have, or what policies would you implement to stem the scourge of violence, which has become a national embarrassment? Our first is very fitting, Councilman Alderman Pawar, candidate Pawar.
You also find lead in the water. You also find schools that have been closed, which is why I fought the mayor on school closings. Because you don't grow a community by closing schools. In sum, it's all of it. We have to come together and stop fighting over scraps. Stop making this a central Illinois versus a Chicago issue. Gun violence impacts us all, and poverty has increased across the entire state. And there's nothing that gets solved without creating opportunity for everybody.
And next, we are pleased to have candidate Pritzker.
Once again, this is an issue that I've been involved with for more than 25 years. I was chairman of the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence Advisory Board. I've been involved in fighting the scourge of illegal guns for decades now. And so I don't come to this conclusion lightly. But you know, the NRA says the people who own guns should have freedom. Freedom to own their guns, freedom to own any guns that they want. But what about the freedom of our children? What about the freedom of our children not to be shot on the way to school? What about the freedom of our families to be able to walk the streets of a neighborhood without worrying about what color they're wearing, about ducking, going from one street to the next? Freedom for people who don't want to get shot. How about fighting for their freedom? Shop licensing bill that's up in Springfield. Those of you know, this bill requires something just very basic. It means that gun dealers should have to get the same background checks that people who go and buy guns from them get. And there should be transparency. You should have the ability to regulate those gun shops. So, ladies and gentlemen, we should talk a lot about how we can and where we can limit and stand up for and against gun violence. But here, it's the biggest problem we face, honestly, is when people don't pick up guns, just because they're laying there. People pick up guns because they've lost hope. Because their economic situation is so bad, because their last ditch connection to society has been cut. And Bruce Rauner not passing a budget is what's cut mental health facilities, and it's cut shelters, and it's cut services for people. And what are they left with? Desperation. You want to get rid of gun violence, let's give people some hope.
And our next candidate to address this important issue is candidate Drury.
So I've been on the front lines of the gun violence battle for over a decade. When I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I was working on Project Safe Neighborhoods. It was a partnership between the federal government and the state government and the local governments to get illegal guns out of our street. And I realized that does a little bit of the job, but it's not everything. And so when I've come to the General Assembly, I'm one of the most outspoken advocates for solving the gun violence problem. And one of the biggest issues we have, and it's a fraud on you, is that we say we're going to pass legislation like to stop the gun violence problem, we're going to pass a bill that puts people in prison for longer. That's not going to stop the gun violence problem. We all know that. Who thinks that's going to stop the gun violence problem? I had my office do an exhaustive search of every article written to find out if there was a link between mandatory minimum sentences and a reduction in gun violence. And you know what? There's not a single one. But in politics, what do? We try to fool you. And we say, oh, we solved the problem. Mission accomplished. We haven't accomplished it because you know what we really need? You know what we need to do. We need to invest in the neighborhoods, right? We need after-school programs. We need the kids need a place to go. And we need to provide hope, because if there's no hope, then all of a sudden joining a gang seems like a good deal. That the potential bad side of being in a gang, getting killed, is offset by the potential upside. We got to change that, and the only way to change that is to invest in the neighborhood. And as a state, we have failed that. We have failed that mission. We failed it when we had leadership of the House, when we had a Democratic governor, supermajorities in the House and Senate. We did nothing. We did nothing. And now that we have Bruce Rauner, we actually now put bills on his desk, seemingly more to embarrass him than to get us any real relief. And I don't like that. That's not my Democratic Party. That's not our Democratic Party. We should be about really helping you. And when I'm governor, we're going to really help you. We're not going to say, oh, well, now there's going to be tough votes we can't take, and because that person can't vote or this person can vote. We're going to vote on the tough issues because you want us to do that, and because we owe it to you. So I'm proud to be on the front lines of this, and I'm proud to stand with you on this issue, and I hope to continue standing with you. Thank you.
And our next speaker is Representative, well, I should say candidate Biss.
We've taken mental health services away from 80,000 people. We've taken substance abuse treatment away from 24,000 people. We've taken a safe place to go after school from 15,000 kids. And then we're supposed to be surprised that there's more violence? It's insulting. It's insulting. So let's say it out loud. The Illinois budget crisis is a matter of life and death. It's a matter of life and death. That's the cost of Bruce Rauner's failure. That's what's at stake in this election. We need a budget, we need the same budget, we need to fund social services and violence prevention programs and safe places. And by the way, if we're going to do that properly, I hate to say this, but we got to fix our tax system. We need to ask the rich to pay their share. If they don't pay their share, we're not going to be able to afford what we need for our communities. That's number one. Number two, we need jobs. We need jobs. We need to invest directly in job creation. We need to put people to work in neighborhoods where there isn't enough economic opportunity. We don't need a theory. We don't need a program. We don't need a concept about training. We need a job where you go to work and get a paycheck. That's what we need to do. And finally, we do need sane legislation around policing, around what the relationship between the police force and the community looks like, about rebuilding that trust, about collaboration, and we need sane gun legislation. I fought hard for that gun dealer licensing bill, because guess what? Of the guns that are used in violent crimes in the city of Chicago, the majority come either from Indiana or Wisconsin, or a couple of shops in the suburbs that we don't have the authority to do anything about because we're not willing enough to stand up to the NRA to pass legislation to create a gun dealer licensing program. I was a co-sponsor of that bill. I fought hard for it. It's out of the Senate. It's waiting for a vote in the House. We need to pass that bill.
And the next speaker is candidate Kennedy.
No, I understand that the bullet that kills the father wounds the child. I know that that kills the child moves the entire community. I know you can't go to school and learn. Think about history and English and math and science when you're trying to process the violence you've been witness to. I know that that destroys lives for generations. I'm from a big family. I'm one of 11, Sheila's one of 5. She's got 31st cousins, I've got more than 50. When you're from a big family, your world expands. Not always in a good way, I guess. People are touched by violence, and they understand these things. They understand cutting off funding for mental health services is cruel and insane. They understand that cutting off help for entire communities is cruel and insane. And I don't know why Governor Rauner does those things. I do know that this area, our part of the state, doesn't have the worst per capita gun violence. There are communities all over Illinois suffering just like we do. Just like we do. They can't hire enough cops. They can't provide after-school programs. They can't take kids off the street. I know that when I wake up on a beautiful June day, and it's sunny outside, my kids, we think of that as an indicator of a great afternoon to come. And I know that so many of the people I am friends with wake up in different neighborhoods, and they see that hot sun rising, and it scares them, because they think that's an omen of a violent night ahead.
Absolutely, please. Thank you so much.
Let me begin by just saying this. As governor, there's one bill I will never sign, and that's open carry. You do not want to open carry. I live in southwestern Illinois, where a lot of people think, everybody is pro-gun. I live 20 miles from St. Louis, where at least one person is being shot every day. That's what's on our news. Okay? Concealed carry requires you to have a permit to carry a firearm. That allows you to carry that firearm. I'm one of the few offices in the state that does FBI background checks that people come to get a concealed carry permit. And I ask this question to everybody that applies. Do you know what you're getting? Do you know what you're getting when you're going to carry a handgun? Okay? Because that's what foremost you have to be thinking about. The second thing I want to talk about is the bill, the registration bill. It needs to go one step further. If you're a beautician, if you're a barber, if you're a store owner, you have to put a shingle out there. If you're a gun dealer, you should put a shingle out there too, because you should know who they are. Okay? I have one that lives 1 block from me. I know he's a dealer. I know how it works. And those processes by which those illegal guns flow into our neighborhoods has got to be intercepted. Okay? And it's intercepted by how we let the dealing go on. Last, but I want to tell you real quick of something I've done. We need young people that are involved in these crimes to be mentored. Therefore, I founded 1 year ago a program called Give 30. I want you to Google this program, give30.net, which gives a mentor to young people from grades 5 through grades 12 that have no hope. It gives them you. You can do something. Go mentor these kids. Tell them right from wrong. Tell them not to get in that car when that drive-by is going to happen. I founded that after an 11-year-old boy in Alton was shot by a drive-by shooting. I know my time is up, but I just had to share that story with you. We all can do something to stop this. As governor, I will do my diligence. Thank you.
All right, at this point, everyone, we are taking some questions from the audience that is directed to specific candidates. and only that candidate will respond. This is to Scott Drury. You are running as a Democratic candidate for governor. However, many of your public statements and some of your voting records seem to fly in the face of democratic ideas and democratic unity. How do those prior actions square with your wanting to be the Democratic nominee for governor? And they don't say who says this, and obviously, I don't know. You can just disagree with the whole, well, you know how to respond.
So whoever asked that question, I really appreciate it.
Okay, great.
I really appreciate it because
And each 2 minutes? 2 minutes for each. Okay.
I think it's okay to be in the Democratic Party and not agree with everything the Democratic Party says. I absolutely think that's okay. I think we need to value. And so people say, oh, you're not a Democrat because you didn't vote for the Speaker of the House, the first Democrat in 3 decades who didn't do that. But you know what? That's what my people in my district wanted, and my title is representative, and I represented them. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. One of the votes they're talking about is this tax on millionaires, whether there's going to 3% surcharge and tax on millionaires. You know what? The Center on Tax and Budget Accountability, Ralph Martiri, who told me he's never seen a tax he doesn't like, he didn't like that bill. You know why? Because that bill, the 3% was going to go pro rata. All that money was going to go pro rata to every student in the state of Illinois. Every single student in the state of Illinois, whether they needed it or not. Whether they needed it or not. It was a gimmick. And I think it's okay to study these bills and say, you know what, it's a gimmick, it's a bad idea. There's been issues about, whether Scott Drury is pro-union or anti-union. There was a bill out there that was going to take away public workers' right to strike. We're one of 11 states in the country that still gives public workers the right to strike, and we were going to take it away. I don't think that's right. I know that's not right. And so I had to vote no on the bill, even though the party said to vote yes, and they have their reasons for doing that. But I talked to scholars at MIT, at Cornell, at University of Illinois, who were labor scholars, and I said, what is going on here? And they said, we don't know. This is a bad bill. Don't do it. So I'm a Democrat. I'm with all of you. I think the party's gotten lost, and I want to return the party to you. If there's any question about my Democratic cred, I went to Cal Berkeley for 4 years. All right, I went to Cal Berkeley for 4 years. I'm a Democrat. And I'm going to be your Democrat, and I'm going to be your governor, and we're going to work together, and we're going to make the party awesome, okay? Thanks for that question.
I can certainly understand why you were happy about the question. This is another from the audience, and this is to candidate Pritzker. Recently, the House and Senate passed the evidence-based model, which will make school funding more equitable regardless of the wealth of the school district. As governor, would you sign the evidence-based bill? If not, do you support the old funding formula, or do you have ideas for a new one?
The funding formula that we've had for so many years, how many people think that was working well? Nobody. So the SB1, the bill that you're talking about, the bill that was sponsored by Andy Minar, is a far sight better than what we've got now. Now, there have been a lot of debates over what kind of funding formula there ought to be, but here's the feature of that bill that I like best, which is the Tier 1 schools. The way the money gets distributed in the new bill, the Tier 1 schools, the ones who get it first, those are the schools that have been left out for so many years. Those are number 1 in this bill. That's what a bill ought to look like. Because there are so many kids who go to school in this state who don't even have books when they get there. There are 45 kids in a classroom with 1 teacher. Now, I don't know about any of you, but there were a couple of grades there where I needed a little extra help from a teacher. And if there's a classroom with 45 kids and 10 of them need a little extra help like I did, and 1 teacher, that ruins it for everybody in the classroom. So we got to reduce class sizes. We got to make sure we're fully funding our system. Before we even talk about that funding formula, which we've got to fix and which SB1 would do, we've got to make sure that we are passing a progressive income tax, making education our number 1 issue in this state, funding our schools, making sure our kids get a quality education all across this state.
Another audience question. This is for candidate Biss. Pensions are grossly underfunded, and give as a cost to our state budget, what are your plans to fix this?
Well, our pensions are grossly underfunded. We're actually the worst in the country when it comes to having well-funded pensions. So let's ask why that is. What's different about us? So let's start here. Do we have the most generous pensions of any state in the country? No, we don't. Do we have the most public workers of any state in the country? No, we don't. But we do have one thing. We have the most impressive track record of any state in the country of skipping pension payments. For not years and not decades, but for generations, politicians have said, listen, I know I'm supposed to make this payment, but I'd rather just spend the money on something else. I'd rather just keep people's taxes down. I'd rather just do the convenient thing, because guess what? I'll be out of office before the chickens come home to roost. Well, the chickens are here, and they're roosting, and enough is enough. So there's a couple things we gotta do. Number one, we gotta make sure that we have a system that promises in a real binding way, not based on good faith, but based on actual rules that the payment's gonna get made year in, year out. There's one pension system in Illinois that's like that. It's called the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, and they're in great shape because the money gets paid every year. By the way, the Texas Constitution says that the Texas Teachers Pension Fund gets its payment every year, and sure enough, they're 100% funded. If they can get it right, for the love of God, we can get it right. And then we have to call out dishonesty on this when it comes. Bruce Rauner talks a great game. Bruce Rauner says we're going to fund our pensions. And then every year he introduces a budget that's got some incredibly convoluted thing in it, and you got to spend 6 hours figuring out what he means. And when you're done untangling all the knots and you're done translating all the confusing words, what he means is kick the can down the road to the tune of another $750 million a year. When I'm governor, I'm not signing a budget that doesn't fund the pension system properly.
Another from the audience. This is for candidate Kennedy. Medicaid costs have gone up every year. What are your plans for, if any, for Medicaid reform?
I'd say this. I'm going to give you extra time there. I'd say this, that this is what I believe is going on in the state. I'm just going to tell you exactly what I think. I think if you wanted Sheila and me and our 4 kids to leave my community, if you wanted to get rid of me, you close my school that my kids could walk to. Then you'd reduce the number of police officers in my town so crime went up. And then lastly, you'd go after the hospital that's a couple of miles away so that my kid with anaphylactic shock is at greater risk. If you did those 3 things, I'd leave. I'd leave a community I've lived in for 22 years that I would like to stay in forever. And I think what you're seeing in the city of Chicago and in the state of Illinois is exactly the same thing. They're not targeting people like me. They're targeting other people, poor people, minority people. The city is becoming smaller and whiter. The city is becoming smaller and whiter. Closing the schools. They're allowing the crime rate to go up. We have 2,000 fewer cops than we did a decade ago. And we're closing the safety net hospitals, which gets to this question. What's happening in the city of Chicago, that massive gentrification, where it's getting smaller and whiter, is being played out at the state level as well. You want to know what's going on? Our state is getting smaller, and it got wealthier. The state, on a per capita basis, got 10% wealthier last year. All of you feel like you got richer? What happened is we pushed the poor out of our state. We cut off funding for their parents' health care. We went after their children's services. Anybody who has disabilities can no longer get that help in our state, and they move elsewhere, and that is immoral and should be stopped.
Very good. We have another question from the audience. This is for candidate Leiber. If the budget crisis doesn't end, what are your plans to pay back the bills of $24 billion and fix the deficit of $7.8 billion?
I'm ready to do that. And I'm ready to do it in 60 days, because the sooner it's done, the better you and I are. Do you realize today, you and I paid $12 million of interest again? Do you realize that? And do you know tomorrow, you and I are going to pay another $12 million of interest? And we're going to do it the next day, and the next day, and the next day till there's a budget? So let me tell you, passing progressive income tax is great, but I'm going to tell you, you're not going to get any revenue from it until 2021, because it's going to take a constitutional amendment to pass progressive income tax to bring that revenue in. The first and foremost thing that I will do, and I support Senator Harman's bill. He wanted to bond out $7 billion worth of debt. He had the right idea. I'm for bonding out the debt, reducing the deficit, and have a manageable budget that you can pay the interest off annually, which frees up about $1.8 billion to reinvest in our schools, to reinvest in the mental health system of our state, and to make Illinois whole. But we got to pay back, we got to pay off this backlog of bills. You know, as a resident, every month you pay your bills, or your lights get shut off, your water gets shut off. Okay? I will tell you, I'm not going to cry as to what the state owes me, and what they owe all the schools in the state, what they owe all the social providers. But we have to pay our bills, and we've got to do it within 60 days after the next person takes office. And there has to be a plan, because that's what the governor does not have. The governor doesn't have a plan as to how to get it done and won't act on it. Okay? Elected to become governor, I will have a budget by the end of February as required by a governor. And I want to tell you, there's part of this process of understanding how to govern. You know, before today's program, I talked to a lot of elected officials in here. Trustees, mayors, county board people. And you know what we all agreed on? We couldn't operate this way. We couldn't operate this way. And my hat's off to everybody in local government for keeping this state moving forward each and every day, because we need revenue from our state to our local governments. We cannot impair corporate personal property tax to them. We cannot impair motor fuel tax money to them. We cannot impair revenue sharing, and we must pay grants. See that they're funded with their grants to provide the services that everybody has. That's my plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is our last question from one of our mayors here, and this is for candidate Pawar. As project director of maternal and child health program, I appreciate support of pro-choice, mental health, and youth mentoring. What will you do as governor to include fathers in case management process to improve men's health?
Thank you for that question. We're talking about investing in people, and that includes moms and dads. That includes passing a budget to prop up and invest in our social service providers. The thing is, lots of our public policy is biased in many ways. For a long time, the EITC, I don't believe the EITC takes into account single fathers, because people who pass legislation don't believe that single fathers exist. This is what happens when we elect people who believe some communities deserve and others don't. This is what happens when we elect people who believe everyone has the same, quote, bootstraps. What they don't recognize is the inequities that touch communities, whether it comes to single moms, single dads, all kinds of families, that if we don't invest in them, if we start looking at them as the other, and start looking at communities that have been left behind as weak, nothing ever changes. I go back to the beginning. I told you I got involved in public service and I ran for office because I watched politicians and policymakers blame poor people for poverty. They blamed moms and dads. They blamed young people for not evacuating from New Orleans without thinking about the day-to-day issues that impact communities every single day. So if we continue to look at people as deserving and undeserving, and electing people like Bruce Rauner who use code words to say that, you know what, we don't really need to help single dads because they don't exist. Or, you know, poor people need to make better decisions so they can take care of themselves. If we continue to do that, that's how we get to a place where we look at one another and look at one another as the other based on skin color, based on religion, based on whether you're an immigrant, based on whether you live in a rural community or an urban area. We have to reject that politics and come together and start believing in one another and start taking care of one another as neighbors.
Isn't that great? Listen, we're out of time. I just want to mention one thing before we turn this over to the Godfather. There was a question we didn't get to from the audience about legalizing marijuana. And
All in favor, say aye.
I want everybody to know, because a lot of people think I smoke pot. And the reason they do that, I did a lot of work for NORML. Remember NORML? I did a lot of work for the National Organization to Repeal Marijuana Laws. But I tell everybody, they say, Cliff, you smoke? I say, no, I don't. I don't want you to do it either. Do not take hot gas into your lungs. You want pot? Eat it. Listen, this has been wonderful. Before I turn it over to the committeeman, I just want to thank Al Riley, working with us.
Let's hear it for Al.
Great. And also the town people who've been great. Antoine Bass, thank you, sir. All right, appreciate it. And thanks to all of you gentlemen, you've been, and ladies, you've been fantastic. I have really enjoyed this. I'm glad I announced it on my show, and I'll be talking about it not tomorrow because I got to do something else, but I will be talking about it Tuesday because this is a wonderful thing. And of course, as I said, I had two other things to do, but when Tim Bradford called me, I said, well, the other two don't matter. So I just want to thank you, Tim, so much.
You're more than welcome.
All right, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, wait. Here's the thing. Now, let me back up for a moment. A couple of things I just want to say. My wife had to go out in the hall because she wasn't feeling well. But my wife and I have been married for 51 years. We know what it is to lose a child through violence. Okay? So the one thing that I always say is that I appreciated the people that turned out for my son's funeral, close to just about 800 people. But the thing that I spoke of, I said, who's crying and taking an interest in the parents other than my wife and I who lost their kids? We have to be concerned about every child whose life is snuffed out. Right. Now, with that being said, before we close up for the T.O. Hardiman's, what was it to you? Well, whatever he was, he's persona non grata now. So, but what happened was, I had said to the gentleman, I said, listen, I know that T.O. has announced late. I had already got a commitment from all these gentlemen who were sitting up here on the stage with me. And I said to him, I said, but what I'll try to do is at least let you have a few moments to speak on T.O.'s behalf. You saw what he chose to do. He chose to disrupt this meeting. And that's why, any kids in here? No, good. That's why I told his ass to get out. Everybody in this room know how I operate. When I run my political meetings, I start on time and I end on time. And I don't take no crap from nobody. That's just how I was raised. But what I want to do, because I want to be fair about this, I'm going to allow T.O. Hardiman to come up and make us a presentation about himself. Let's give him a long round of applause.
Okay, buddy, I'll keep it brief. I'm running for governor. I'm T.O. Hardiman, running for governor. I'd like to apologize to my colleague for kind of being a little disruptive, but he wanted to make sure my voice was heard. However, that's my guy. I support the process. I'm the only African-American person running for governor right now, and I'm running unapologetically as an African-American candidate, and I just want to make that clear. Not just because I'm African-American, because I'm qualified. I ran for governor in 2014 and we secured close to 30% of the state vote out of nowhere. So I know what I'm doing. I have a 2020 plan that represents a perfect vision here in the state of Illinois. A lot of the billionaires are running for governor. They're running as a hobby. I'm running for real. I just want to let y'all know that. My plan includes increasing funding for the schools for sure, increasing funding for domestic violence shelters, mental health institutions, HIV awareness programs. I'm the only candidate that's running for this office that knows how to reduce violence in cities like Chicago. I have a proven plan that definitely works and gets results. I have a good relationship. I'm the only candidate that stood up against police corruption and excessive force in Chicago. I'm not trying to be politically correct for nobody. I'm not up here trying to be a politically correct candidate. I plan to speak the minds and hearts of the people in the state of Illinois. I want the white vote, the Hispanic vote, the Asian vote, and everybody else. I have a master's degree in inner city studies, and I now live in the south suburbs. I live in Calumet City. I'm one of your homeboys right now, okay? I just want to make that clear. I know everybody in the General Assembly. A lot of times when you run for high level office, people say, well, you know what, people have lost their mind. But if Brown can become the governor, and Trump can become the president, I can sure become the governor of the state of Illinois. I have a relationship with people downstate, upstate, all throughout the state. Lake County, East St. Louis, Decatur, Peoria, all throughout Rockford, all the different cities. We have over 4,920 states and towns here in Illinois. All right, right now we have 100-something counties. I need your vote. I need you to look at me. If you look at anybody else, just take a good look at me. My website is toharlemanillinois.org. I know a lot of people in the room here today, and I'm not going to bash nobody. I have a plan, a 2020 plan, that represents the perfect vision for the state of Illinois, and I have a real surprise running mate that's going to run with me for governor. We're going to run all the way in this state, and I want to thank the Rich Town Committee for allowing me to speak, because it was not their fault. I heard about this forum later on. I just got finished speaking to 2 different churches, so I had to rush over here. I'm a solid gold candidate. Do not overlook me. You're not going to have nobody in that office that's going to carry the water and be a champion for the people like a T.O. Hartley, because I've been on the ground level all the way to the top. I've been in conferences with Prime Minister David Cameron during my career, Queen Norfolk Jordan. All this is real. I've worked with people on a high level all the way to the streets. You're not going to find nobody, you'll never see a governor like me that does not need a whole lot of money to get on the ballot and get my message out there. I know how to organize and mobilize the community on a higher level, and I want to thank the Rich Township for allowing me to speak. If you want to talk to me more in the back, feel free to talk to me, but you're not going to get a candidate better than T.O. Hartman for this governor's race for 2018, and we must say no to the billionaires. Say no to the billionaires. Just because they have big money, that does not entitle them to become the governor. Understand it. Take a look at their track record. Some people may not want to hear this, but it's the truth. Say no to these billionaires. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Theo. Listen now, let me say one thing now before we leave out of here. Those of you, I'm addressing this to people who are part of each of the candidates' campaign. If you would be so kind as to go over to my far right, this side of the room here, so that anyone that's here that wants to sign up to join one of these candidates' campaigns as a volunteer, just go over there to the right, to this part of the room, and their representatives from their campaigns will be over on that side of the room. So, with that being said, if anyone wants to do that, please join them on that side. So now, we're going to have a group shot of the candidates before they leave, but give all of yourselves a great round of applause.